Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar exploring Apple's MDM framework and endpoint security. Thanks for joining us. As everyone is still getting signed in, we'll just go over a few housekeeping items. Please think of questions throughout the session and direct them to the Q&A section. If we don't get to all of your questions, we'll follow up with you afterwards. This webinar will be recorded and we will share the recording with you shortly after the webinar is finished. Reaching out to info@jamf.com will also get you in contact with someone at Jamf quickly. My name is Aaron Webb and my role here at Jamf is Senior Product Marketing Manager for Security. I'm delighted to be here today to share this session with you as we explore Apple's MDM framework and endpoint security. The focus of this webinar is to highlight what both Apple's MDM framework and endpoint security is, what it can do, and how MDM and security vendors like us here at Jamf leverage the tools to help you manage and secure Apple devices in your organization. Before we jump into the content of the session, let me give you an overview of what we'll be covering today. We will start with an overview of Apple's MDM framework for managing Macs, iPhones, iPads, and Apple TVs before moving on to Apple's endpoint security as a baseline security tool and how it provides additional layers of security. We'll then explore how to achieve compliance, adopt at scale and apply security frameworks to your Apple fleet. And finally, finish up by exploring how using Jamf for both management and security can help bring together device management, user identity, and endpoint protection in what we call here at Jamf trusted access. Before I leave you, I'll open up the session to the Q&A to round us out. But before we jump in, let me give you a brief overview of Jamf. Here at Jamf, our purpose is to simplify work. And more than 73,500 organizations rely on Jamf to manage over 31 million devices. Our recent stats show just some of the industries we support in the enterprise space across the globe succeed with Apple. We have a long history of delivering same-day support, so you can ensure that you can support your users the day Apple releases new features and security updates, so you can continue to be productive and secure in your work, no matter what the industry or where you are located in the world. And our customers think highly of the products, services, and support we continue to provide since we started over 20 years ago. So let's get going with our main topic. First, we're going to take a look at Apple's MDM framework, how it works, the features, and how it benefits your organization. Let's explain what MDM is for those who may not know already. MDM stands for Mobile Device Management, and it allows you to securely configure both user and organization-owned devices by sending profiles and commands to the devices through wired, Wi-Fi, or cellular connections. And the great thing about choosing Apple devices is that iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and tvOS have built-in frameworks that support MDM. So why does organizations need an MDM? Well, organizations' numerous and diverse devices require a solution that allows them to manage devices and users in a consistent, scalable way. The MDM protocol simplifies and enhances how you deploy and manage devices, applications, configurations, and certificates. So how can MDM help? Well, MDM can increase device supportability, security, and organization functionality while maintaining user flexibility. MDM also allows you to update software and device settings, monitor compliance with organizational policies, and remotely wipe or lock devices. And it also eliminates password-related tickets with password synchronization. Now, users can enroll their own devices in MDM, and you can also use Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager to enroll organizational-owned devices in MDM automatically. Now, let's take a quick high-level overview look at how MDM works. To use MDM and to make the most of it for your organization, you must understand how MDM uses enrollment and configuration profiles supervision, payloads, and declarations. So let's get started with enrolling devices. First, the device has to enroll with an MDM solution like Jamf Pro, which installs an enrollment profile that links the device to the MDM solution. User-owned devices can use user enrollment, whereas organization-owned devices whose serial numbers appear in Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager can automatically enroll in MDM using automated device enrollment. For those devices that don't qualify for automated device enrollment, you can manually enroll them using device enrollment. So now that the device is enrolled in the MDM, let's take a look at installing an enrollment profile. The device downloads the enrollment profile during the enrollment process. Now, in some cases, the download is automatic, and in other cases, an MDM administrator or the user downloads the profile to install it. You can install or distribute an enrollment profile in several ways. For instance, you can email the enrollment profile to the user or ask the user to download it from an organization portal. After the enrollment is complete, the MDM manages the device. Now, during the initial configuration, including any subsequent policy changes or app assignments, the device receives instructions from the MDM and acts on them accordingly. The device continues to receive updates from the MDM server until it's unenrolled from the service. So we have the device enrolled and managed by the MDM. Let's see how the MDM notifies the device. The MDM server queues up a command for the device and sends a notification to the device through the Apple Push Notification Service, known as APNS. MDM solutions use APNS to maintain persistent communication with devices across both public and private networks. The MDM requires multiple certificates to operate, including an APNS certificate to talk to clients and a Secure Socket Layer SSL certificate to communicate securely. MDM solutions may also sign profiles with a certificate. So to use APNS, devices need a persistent connection to Apple's servers over Ethernet, cellular data if the device actually is capable of offering that, or Wi-Fi. So we now have a way of communicating from the MDM to the device via APNS. So let's see how the device contacts the server. The device simply receives the notification and contacts the MDM server. It's that simple. So now we've established a secure way of communicating both back and forth between the MDM server and the device. And this lays the foundations for what you want to go and do for your end users, which is to deliver content. After it's connected to the MDM server, the device downloads and acts on the queued command. When your MDM solution wants to install an app, it sends a push notification to the device. The device checks in and the process an install application command and then fetches the actual app file from the App Store or from a local network caching server. Now imagine doing that for all your devices in just a few clicks. That's the power of MDM to manage your Apple fleet at scale from wherever you are. And that process is constantly getting better thanks to Apple's constant innovation. Declarative Device Management, or DDM, is an update to the existing management protocol that works with the MDM protocol. And it uses declarations to asynchronously update the device settings, restrictions, assets, and more. And as you can see in the diagram, declarations are payloads that represent policies from the MDM server defines and sends them to the devices. And there are 4 types of declarations: configurations, assets, activations, and management. As part of DDM, status channels allows devices to proactively report the status of objects like passcode compliance and MDM installed apps without constantly polling from the MDM server. The device proactively updates the server with new information about itself. The MDM server subscribes to a device status item, and the updates to the device information for this specific item are then incrementally reported back to the server. Now, MDM solutions are available from a number of vendors like us here at Jamf, with a focus on Apple first, Apple best. And we've been helping organizations succeed with Apple for over 20 years. But not all vendors offer the same features and support for everything in the MDM framework. So it's worth doing your research. And if you don't currently use an MDM, request a trial and start to enroll some of your devices. Now, with this single framework, you configure and control all of the Apple devices enrolled in your MDM solution. You can use the secure management framework to configure and update settings, deploy applications, monitor compliance, query devices, and remotely wipe organizational data. And that's because the framework is built into the Apple devices. It works both with organization and user-owned devices. Now, the framework provides settings that Apple create to manage those devices. And in general, these settings are known as the MDM settings, which are grouped into several categories and functions and processes, which include the following. Those are configuration profiles, restrictions, as well as commands, and also queries. Now, because the MDM protocol is built into the devices themselves, providing a standard framework for device management, the management protocol supports configurations for apps, accounts, and data on each device. Now, this includes integrated features such as password policy enforcement, controls to remain transparent to users while ensuring their personal information stays private. And your organization maintains necessary oversight without disrupting the productivity users need to succeed. Now, the protocol in Apple's management framework provides a way to tell a device to remotely execute certain management commands or queries. Now, as we've seen earlier, the device enrolls in the MDM server, then the server then pushes notifications to that device when there are commands to process on them. Now, when the device receives the notification, it polls the server for the command, processes the command, and then reports the command results to the server. The device then checks in for any other commands to process. Now, the protocol supports several key functions. Implementing device management, so set up an MDM server and send commands to manage devices. Those commands and queries which manage the configuration and behavior of your devices. Check in to authenticate devices and maintain push tokens with these commands. User enrollment, which is authenticating devices to a user identity-focused workflow. Declarations, which are declarations available for device management. And then obviously status reports, which are reports from the device about its current state. Now, the protocol also gives MDM solutions the ability to integrate with several key deployment services. Now, one of those services is the device assignment, where you can manage devices for your users. You've also then got roster management, so you can manage classes for your students and teachers. And there is also app and book management to manage apps and books for your end users. So the last two are obviously used heavily in education. We still deploy apps and books within the enterprise, but those are ways in which you can actually start to leverage Apple School Manager and Apple Business Manager to really help you manage that content and link up to your MDM solution. Now, as mentioned earlier, the future of Apple device management is declarative device management, and it's a transformative update to the MDM protocol. Now, declarative device management is supportive with automated device enrollment and profile-based user enrollment, in addition to device enrollment and shared iPad, which is often used in education. Now, you can use profile payloads on various Apple operating systems for users or devices. Payload settings for Apple devices are detailed in the Automated Device Enrollment MDM payload list and are categorized by these parameters. So payload name notes that the name of the payload in Apple Configurator, but if you are using a third-party MDM solution, the payload name may be slightly different. Supported operating system and channel notes the supported operating system and specifies whether you can use the payload for a device configuration profile or for a user configuration profile. Interaction notes how settings of different payloads interact when applied to a device. Now, you can apply multiple payloads to the same kind of a device. So if payloads contain account, certificate, or network configurations, each of the payload settings are applied simultaneously. Now, you need to be careful when configuring multiple network payloads because some network payloads may conflict with others and could prevent users from connecting to the network. For example, if two payloads define different network settings for the same SSID, the result is undefined. Now, iOS and iPadOS payloads containing restrictions don't conflict because each payload uses the most restrictive value possible. Now, combined payloads define items which aren't mutually exclusive. So you can use combined payloads to add usage restrictions together to form a restrictive environment where the user has very limited options on what they can do and use on the device. The settings for combined payload items are linked together. Combined payloads usually things like mail or LDAP accounts, where the existence of one type of account doesn't prelude you having existence across other payloads. So in iOS, iPadOS, and tvOS, if you combine payloads that have the same account description or display name, they're treated as exclusive payloads. Which brings me on to exclusive payloads, which have one possible version of a setting like device names, password policies, or specific network settings. Now, you can apply this setting only once. So, for example, a device can't simultaneously have more than one global HTTP proxy payload. Now, any duplicate payload setting simply overwrites the previous setting. And finally, duplicates, which describes one specific payload, single or more, which have a specified payload which can be delivered to a user or device. For example, you can have one that's subscribed calendars payload to a single configuration profile. Now, in this case, you can subscribe to the user to more than one calendar. It's worth noting that not all these payloads and their retrospective settings are available in all MDM solutions. So it's worth consulting your MDM's vendor's documentation or requesting a trial when exploring which MDM to implement in your organization. Now, there are a wealth of restrictions that you can deploy to each device in your organization. There are so many to list, and I can't go into all of them here in the webinar due to time. But if you scan this QR code, it will take you to the Apple deployment guide where you can see all the MDM restrictions for iPhone and iPad devices, Mac, Apple TV, and even supervised devices. Apple's powerful hardware and versatility platforms create a unique environment to build custom apps for your organization and help users be productive and collaborative. A modern approach to managing Apple devices involves committing to the latest software, testing it year-round, and ensuring that everything works together. Now, Apple's platform adoption lifecycle includes these key considerations and ongoing activities for each time a beta version is released. Now, evaluating key areas of Apple's platform, evaluating and preparing your environment, installing and managing software updates, testing beta releases all year round, submitting feedback, and also getting ready for your rollout. It's also about educating users on new features. So if you haven't signed up for the Apple Beta program, Apple Seed, please go and do that because it's well worth doing. You can test these well before they come out to make sure all of these things can work in your organization. It's also worth noting that you also want to sign up for any betas that your MDM provider might offer as well. So if you're a Jamf customer, make sure you sign up for those beta agreements so you can actually start to see how the MDM works and how we implement these new features that Apple bring to the market. Now, when you implement Apple's platform testing, you can not only be confident that when users update, but you can also enjoy enhanced data security, improved productivity, maximum uptime, and greater user satisfaction. So with MDM covered, before we get into endpoint security, let's take a look at the built-in security Apple has in its products straight out the box. Now, Apple devices are secure as they are easy to use. State-of-the-art features makes it simple to protect your data and devices, and built-in frameworks enable IT to manage security system-wide. Together, Apple hardware, software, and services make advanced security seamless. So let's take a look. First of all, you've got Touch ID and Face ID, which gives you a fast, easy, and secure way to unlock devices, open protected files, and retrieve passkeys at the touch or at a glance. Apple Silicon works seamlessly with macOS, iPadOS, and iOS to deliver an advanced security and privacy features to keep your operating system and data safe. Apple Silicon features Secure Enclave, which encrypts and protects the passcode to safeguard Touch ID and Face ID data. Automatic software updates run in the background, so your devices stay secure over the long haul. And rapid security response patches, RSRs, patches vulnerabilities between updates. So now leveraging MDM, IT can choose when the updates are available to users or push updates for an entire fleet. Secure Boot is designed so that only legitimate OS software from Apple can load at startup, and the signed system volume helps prevent any tampering during that runtime. This means that Mac is safe from the moment it leaves the factory, and it doesn't need to image computers before they go to employees. And finally, Find My makes it fast and simple to locate lost or stolen devices, even if they go offline or asleep. It lets you lock or erase remotely to protect your data, and Find My works on Mac, iPad, iPhone, and Apple Watch. So built-in encryption features give you secure access to your devices, messages, and networks, so data stays protected at rest and on the move. And your devices stay encrypted even if they fall into the wrong hands. So on Mac, sensitive data and files can't be accessed without an encryption key, and IT can manage File Vault to make sure encryption is enabled. Now, iMessage encrypts messages as you send them and only unencrypts them on your recipient's device, so your messages stay secure. And iMessage comes equipped with Blastdoor to isolate and evaluate incoming messages for potential threats. Now, modern secure networking standards are built into Apple devices, so employees can access corporate networks securely from anywhere with minimal setup, and IT doesn't have to keep devices behind a legacy firewall. And Apple devices support virtual private networks, or VPNs, out of the box to encrypt and protect corporate data. macOS, iPadOS, and iOS work with the industry standard networks that you may already use, like IKE v2, Cisco IPsec, and L2TP over IPsec. So with much security built into the Apple products, why would you need a third-party security vendor? Now, Apple provides a wealth of security on their devices, but they also know that when devices go into the workplace, there are additional requirements that organizations need. Advanced detection. And that's exactly why there is an Apple Endpoint Security, so that developers can build solutions to monitor, analyze, and respond to security threats. These solutions, like Jamf Protect, use system extensions so IT can stay on top of threats without impacting overall performance for users. So let's take a look. Now, Endpoint Security is an API that Apple provide so that developers can build security products for the Mac. Now, Apple's first introduced Endpoint Security in macOS Catalina as a replacement for the deprecated Kioth KPI, the unsupported Mac kernel framework, and also the depreciated OpenBSM audit trail. Now, it is a C API providing a rich security event stream to third-party antivirus, endpoint detection and response, or EDR, and data leakage prevention solutions. Now, by making this functionality available in the Endpoint Security API, Apple removed the need for third-party vendors to have to develop kernel extensions, and since its introduction, it's been a resounding success. Apple is both recognizing the need for additional security mechanisms, specifically defense in depth, as well as embracing third-party security vendors such as Jamf to fulfill this role. A common component of many security tools is a process and file monitor. Now, as the name implies, these watch for various processes, start, terminate, etc., and file, create, open, and delete events. Such monitors are often extract meta information such as the process or the file path, process arguments and process code signing information. Now, armed with a process and file monitor, security tools may be able to detect anomalous or malicious activity, such as a malicious document that installs malware when opened, or malicious website that infects a user system when visited, or a Trojanized application that installs adware when a user is tricked into opening it, or a persistent backdoor that steals keychain secrets on an infected system. So why is endpoint security so important? Well, many Mac admins these days are asked to do or at least help manage the security of their Mac fleets, which in turn means that they need to understand the basic components of Mac security, which can be addressed with MDM, but also require the need of additional security tools. Now, these tools are to help address macOS security threats. And there is sometimes a misconception that Macs are not targeted, but they are, and it's on the increase, which I'll speak to shortly. The step from vulnerabilities is then to actual threats. So you know and sometimes accept that there are vulnerabilities in the software and the devices that you manage, but sometimes those vulnerabilities are exploited. Or when someone or something exploits such a flaw, it can then become a threat. Now, threats are malicious. And they purposefully try to do something on devices that you manage that you don't want to happen. Now, threats can represent a consortium of impacts. They can also be severe in terms of gaining access to databases where you store your company's information. And they come in various different forms and are known by very different names. So they could be adware, they could be ransomware, keyloggers, spyware, Trojans, viruses, and worms. But for the simplicity's sake, let's just call these just threats for this webinar. Now, malware is a software that's designed to be malicious in some way. And they can be of annoyance, but it's the way in which they're going to be exploited, which is going to have an impact on both your time, the organization's money, data, brand reputation. There's so much that can be damaged from a vulnerability that leads to a malicious threat. So when thinking about threats, it can help to look at the behavior. Now, before a threat can do anything, it needs to find its way to be installed on a host. And there are a few ways in which this can happen. Now, the first is by user interaction, and it usually occurs by tricking the user into downloading and installing some software. This could be through a web pop-up, or it could be via an email. There are many ways bad actors are trying to target end users to trick them to trigger an event on their device. Now, an exploited vulnerability can sometimes be within legitimate software that a bad actor can exploit. And I'll come on to Jamf Threat Labs and their research shortly. But if you want to go and check out the vulnerabilities that the team have discovered, especially on legitimate software, go and check out jamf.com and read about some of their reports, but I'll come on to that shortly. Now, there's also the supply chain which is becoming more prevalent. An attacker is able to inject its malware into the systems before they're distributed to customers and can therefore attack those customers en masse. Now, once a piece of malicious software gets installed, rather than it being wiped out by a simple reboot on Mac, there are two common ways for bad actors to get it to stay on the device. You've got launch agents, which run in a user's space and don't require any admin privileges. And then you've also got launch daemons, which run system-wide as soon as the computer starts up. But they do require elevated privileges to install. Now, these methods and locations for installing or activating launch agents and daemons are well known and understood, but there are other less common ways of achieving persistence, including login items, which require more user interaction before they're enabled. Now, once the device malware executes and is set out to achieve what it could be, anything from extracting key data and sensitive information, holding that data for ransom through to adware or even spyware. Now, the impact on organizations is huge. Not only is it loss of productivity, but money, sensitive company information and data, not to mention the time to resolve the issue. Now, with endpoint security vendors like Jamf can create logic to perform actions triggered by events. So if you detect a file download, check its metadata for signs of malware, and if you see such signs, you can kill the download. That's why it's worth investing in endpoint security tools such as Jamf Protect that will prevent malware from being installed in the first place. Remove it if it does get installed and will prevent it from running again. And the best of all, it works in harmony with Jamf Pro, which is an MDM solution. So with MDM and endpoint security covered, the next step is to implement a security strategy. Now, organizations need to manage many security features on multiple platforms and devices. To help protect organizations, Apple devices are designed with industry-leading privacy and security technologies. Asking important questions plays a massive part in building a solid foundation for a successful security strategy. And when you have the knowledge to help define policies that address security, privacy, and compliance, it brings all together the pieces of the security puzzle. To make compliance easy, there is the macOS Security Compliance Project. Now, this is an open source effort to provide a pragmatic approach to generating security guidance, and Apple acknowledges the macOS Security Compliance Project with information on their security certifications and compliance center page. It is a joint project of various federal operational IT security staff, and it brings me on nicely to Jamf Compliance Editor, which was an app built to make this process easier and links directly to MDM like Jamf Pro to make deployment a breeze. Now, as we've already seen, Apple makes some of the most secure hardware and software in the world. But as an organization, you need to configure endpoints to meet your unique compliance or regulatory requirements and demonstrate that compliance for regulators, cybersecurity insurance, and more. Now, Compliance Editor makes it incredibly easy to configure and document your security. If you'd like to learn more about our free tool, Jamf Compliance Editor, head over to trusted.jamf.com, where you can download and start configuring your compliance based on your chosen security framework. So let's press forward and round up by exploring how management and security can help bring together device management, user identity, and endpoint protection. So Jamf exists to bridge the gap between what Apple provides and the enterprise requires. And when Apple innovates, Jamf celebrates. And that's not more true than ever following the recent WWDC announcements this year. And we believe that providing employees with the device platform of choice drives productivity, creativity, and retention. So said differently, the best way to simplify work is to bring consumer simple technology to work. We are confident in our focus on the Apple ecosystem, and the market is validating that focus. Now, broadening adoption is thanks to performance with strong hardware performance with all-day battery life for most tasks. The price with Apple Silicon driving significant improvers in cost to performance ratio, and productivity with digital transformation driving PC-only applications to become platform agnostic. And Jamf recently conducted a survey which showed that 89% of users indicated that they were willing to make a salary sacrifice for a device choice. Now, additionally, 62% of users surveyed preferred using Apple at work. And over the past 3 years, the Windows PC market has grown a total of only 6%, while Mac has grown 60%. Now, as of July this year, PC shipments overall were down 13.4%, whereas Apple were up 10.3%. So it's clear that users love Apple and it's influencing Mac adoption at work. Now, even with this growth, many organizations face what we call the Apple adoption gap. So how do we close that gap? Well, it's important part is to resolve in for deployment challenges, which is what Jamf is known for. The other part is figuring out how Apple fits in the current age of remote working and zero trust programs. So Apple are doing their part in providing the tools and the framework for deployment, but then there's also the pull that we've got from organizations who want to look at remote work and zero trust programs. Now, both of these is a concern, which is why Apple have created that MDM framework and endpoint security API. But to help with that adoption, in order, many organizations are looking to implement a zero trust program, but with little success. So most zero trust programs share these elements. And at Jamf, we call this trusted access, where only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant can access sensitive data. Now, whether you utilize Jamf Stack or integrate with some of your existing management security tools, trusted access is the best way to manage and secure Apple at work. Now, trusted access combines and connects the best elements of device management, identity and access workflows, and endpoint security. Now, we've been talking about this a lot with customers to help them understand what true zero trust solutions can look like with Apple. And for many orgs, the initial objective is deployment. And when with enrollment built into every Apple device, that's become a very confident and repeatable process, with most recently user enrollment for BYOD. Another component that most organizations have in place today is an identity provider. And years ago, we did something quite unique, which was bridging the usage between the cloud identity onto the Mac. From account creation to password synchronization, this is the price of admission, and when we're excited about the new platform SSO technologies to make it even better. So identity alone is not enough, and valid credentials with multi-factor authentication does not guard against all attacks. Now, we want to ensure that every endpoint being used for work is protected. And when we talk about the safety and security of endpoints, that can mean a few different things. Each adds your overall security posture. So first is deploying secure baselines and auditing security benchmarks, including things like file vault. It's also important to embrace Apple's management and security frameworks, including the Endpoint Security API, to truly be able to audit the security of your endpoints. It's also critical to monitor things like known vulnerabilities in previous operating systems versions and applications. Now, Apple has acknowledged that the most recent release is the most secure release, and not all fixes can or will be backported, and this should be part of your zero trust signaling. Additionally, Jamf constantly monitors endpoints for threats to automatically block and quarantine malware, keeping your endpoints protected and your data safe. And in a recent Jamf Threat Labs malware analysis, less than half of macOS malware samples studied over a 1-year period could be identified by VT-hosted security solutions. Now, what this means is it's not only attackers are targeting Apple due to its popularity, but also not all third-party tools are as effective as identifying and stopping Mac malware, even though they may be using Apple's Endpoint Security API, as we've discussed earlier. This also extends to mobile. Now, mobile has built-in protection, app isolation, and vetted app stores. These platforms remain vulnerable to sophisticated attacks that traditional mobile threat defense solutions are unable to detect. Now, lockdown mode is an example of functionality built to defend against these highly sophisticated attacks. Now, Jamf Threat Labs has also been working more closely with Apple to identify vulnerabilities that attackers may use to exploit a Mac or iPhone, and thanks to recent enhancements with our advanced detection and response capabilities on iOS. Now, we've written a lot lately about some of these findings, with several Apple OS CVE discoveries recently being attributed to Jamf Threat Lab researchers. If you'd like to know more, check out Jamf Threat Labs on jamf.com, where you can find detailed reports and blogs on their discoveries. Now, as much as we harden endpoints, and as much as we want to offer security awareness training for employees, user interactions will always be a source of risk to your organization. Now, we offer device-wide protection, but also lots of interactions with end users to make them aware of what's actually going on the device. We also provide simple security awareness notifications through the Jamf Trust app to help your users learn how to work smarter and safer. Now, users are working from anywhere and from any kind of device. And in most cases, organizations need more than the traditional conditional access workflows, because you need to secure all work traffic. Now, this includes cutoff to access the moment a risk is detected. Now, whether you use Jamf Connect or another ZTNA solution, it's critical to ensure that all of these different layers of security from MDM to EDR inform your access decisions. It's also really important that you're able to connect device health and risk signals from your MDM or EDR to inform these access decisions dynamically. Now, in an ideal world, nothing would go wrong. But when reality hits, it's important to have a robust set of automation remediation options available for when it's time to respond to a security incident. Now, perhaps you need to suspend a user's access, update an operating system, or update a vulnerable app. Maybe you need to it's important to notify the user themselves. The task will vary depending on the nature of the issue, but the important thing to understand is that Jamf offers a robust device management foundation that allows organizations to resolve any number of different issues with powerful automation tools. So that's how we see Jamf and Apple delivering trusted access to create an environment that users love and a workplace organization trust. Now, taking built-in security designed by Apple into all of their products, leveraging MDM framework, providing advanced detection from the Apple Endpoint Security API, and bringing all that together with identity and access management with our strategic integrations with Microsoft, Okta, Google, AWS to ensure that you succeed with Apple. All of us at Jamf, along with our friends at Apple, are here to help you navigate these complex topics. And we're here to show you how you can accomplish all of this with Jamf, or how Jamf can integrate into some of your existing components that you have already deployed today. Before we finish up, I'd like to make you aware of some of the valuable resources that Apple provides, that everything that you need to know and learn about the technology, both online and in your own time. Now, the Apple Deployment and Management course goes into more depth on what we've covered today and introduces IT professionals to the skills, tools, and knowledge that they need to deploy Apple devices. There's also an Apple Deployment and Management exam where you earn an Apple Certified IT Professional's digital badge to share on your preferred professional networking site and to use it to promote your achievement. And if you want to dive more into around the endpoint security, you can check out the documentation. It's open. You don't need to be a developer, but you can check out the documentation. It's on developer.apple.com. That's it for this session. I hope you found this insightful and learned some useful information that can help you bring together device management, user identity, and endpoint protection for your organization.